Welcome back to the Centered on Buffalo podcast. This week, we are going to be talking about the NFL Combine from a player's perspective. The guys are arriving in Indianapolis this week, and so we're going to talk about what they can expect there and what my experience was at the Combine. We're going to start off first by giving a shout out to our podcast partner, Waterboy. They are my favorite electrolytes right now. I love this workout hydration, using it around my workouts, getting that good sweat in. You got to replace with electrolytes. They have tons more electrolytes than any of the leading sports drinks. They also have no sugar. So check them out. There's a link in the description. Use code Eric Wood. You'll get a discount there. Go support our friends at Waterboy. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast, whether that's on YouTube, your favorite podcast provider. Go support the show, and we greatly appreciate all of the new subscribers and listeners that we've been gaining. All right, so let's hop on in. So for the NFL Combine, generally these guys that are going to be training for the Combine, you know when you get your invite sometime during your last season in college, whether that's, redshirt sophomore, junior, senior year, whenever you're eligible, and you'll take off for Combine training pretty much immediately after the Combine, or right after your last game. My training was out in Irvine, California, so I got to go from Louisville, where it's cold and snowy, out to sunny California, which was awesome. Really enjoyed my time out there. We had a bunch of awesome dudes with Athletes First training out there, multiple first-round draft picks. We had Mark Sanchez, B.J. Raji, myself, Clay Matthews, and Donald, the running back from UConn. All of us were first-rounders, all of us training together. So it's awesome to get around all those guys, see how they train, see their work ethic. And besides the Senior Bowl and maybe a couple days around Christmas when I went home, it's balls to the wall training, 2-a-days for 5 days a week. You'll go in on Saturdays as well. Sunday's your day off, but that's going to look like a recovery day, stretching and all the modalities, cold plunging, whatever it may be, to get your body right to get back to training the following week. And a lot of you're training like a track athlete. Even for me as an NFL offensive lineman, I was training to sprint at the Combine, to jump, to bench 225 as many times as I could. And I don't know that that's the best thing for these guys to be doing, because you should continue to train like a football player. But the way it's set up, you got to go and show out at Indianapolis. So you train essentially like a explosive track athlete, essentially, when you're doing your Combine training. So, that lasted about 3 months, and then you head to Indianapolis. And, for me, the time change was tough going to Indianapolis. I wish I would have got there a little bit sooner. I probably wish I would have gone, maybe back to Louisville for about a week, adjust the time zone, then go to Indy. But, I wanted to prep all the way up into the point of getting to Indianapolis for the Combine. And so I went straight there. And yes, it was an adjustment, with the time zone, but not all those guys, people are training around the country. So it is what it is. One of the worst things is you're staying at a train station while you're in Indianapolis. And so in the middle of the night, a train would come, wake you up in the middle of the night. And a lot of the Combine week is not set up for you to succeed mentally or physically. And that's okay. They want it to be tough conditions on you. I always say, if a guy runs super fast at the Combine, he's really fast, really, really fast, especially these receivers that run later, when the turf's all beat up and all that. Those guys are super fast. Credit to Worthy with a last name in W. And we'll get into this in a minute. When you have a last name that ends in the later in the alphabet, the turf's even more chewed up, but we'll get to that. One morning they wake you up super early to take a drug test, and then you really can't fall back asleep. So, 4 something in the morning, wake up call, and then keep you up all day, whether it's meetings or medical or whatever that may be. Speaking of medical, there's tons of medical examinations, and that's kind of the first part of the Combine. Maybe a day after getting there, you're going through and they're looking at anything that possibly got dinged up on you in college. They're talking to your trainers. They're getting you all your medical reports, anything that you ever even got treated on. I mean, it could be a finger. They're going to look at it and see if they can red flag you in any way possible. I never missed a game in college, but certainly got dinged up along the way. So they were looking at me head to toe. One of their concerns was a PCL that I had. So an injury to my right knee. I'd done a PCL in college my senior year, didn't miss any games, but they wanted to really examine that, see how stable it was. And, part of your Combine training is learning how to maybe flex your hamstring a little bit to create some extra stability in that knee. And that's just part of the game. And the knee was fine. It wasn't like I was pulling a fast one on them, but I could create some extra stability in there based upon, flexing my hamstring a little bit when they're pulling on my knee. And so you thank God I didn't have to go back, but a lot of guys have to go back and get medically rechecked, and you have to travel back to Indianapolis for stuff that team said, hey, I want to see this again before we invest all of this draft capital in a player. We're going to give a quick shout out to Dano's Seasoning, my favorite seasonings out there. They kept you prepped all season long for your barbecues, for your tailgates. Let them make you look good this offseason. Go check them out at danosseasoning.com or go check them out at a retail store near you. They have an awesome line of seasonings. Go check them all out. I got them all upstairs in my pantry. They are great. Yum, yum, get you some. All right. So part of the combine week is you got to take a Wonderlic test. And, Fitzpatrick famously got a 50 on his Wonderlic test. Even he'll tell you he didn't get a perfect score. He didn't even fill it all out. The hardest part about the Wonderlic is getting it all done in time, because you have 50 questions and you have 12 minutes to get it done. And some of them just take some time to figure it out. They're not necessarily super hard, but it takes some time to get these answers done. So it's hard to just get them all done in time. That's one of the hardest parts about the Wonderlic. It wasn't super challenging to me. I felt pretty good about my score, but you don't even get your score. I just know I got above a 30, and we'll get to that in a minute, how I knew that. But I knew I got above a 30. I had heard a 32. I had heard a 35. I'm not sure exactly what I got, but a passing grade. And, a lot's been made over the years about maybe a Vince Young Wonderlic score. And that could be a red flag because teams want to see how quick you could think on your toes. But look, there's a big difference between being football smart and book smart. This is more about being book smart. And so throughout the week, you'll also get your body fat done. You'll weigh in. And then on that same day, you do the bench press. And, you're standing there in just a pair of tights, weighing in front of everybody. For me, I wanted to show that I could, play at a heavier weight than I was at in college. So that involved chugging as much water as I possibly could. Felt like I was going to pee my pants doing the weigh in and the body fat percentage, but got it done. Didn't pee my pants and weighed in at 310 on the dot, which was my goal. My goal was to get to 310 pounds. And that was my weigh-in exactly at the combine. So I was happy with that. And then on the bench press, my goal was to get 30 reps, and I got exactly 30 reps. I think I could have maybe got more, but I paused at 30 because I was so happy that I got my goal. And the reason that was my goal is because in college, my offensive line coach, Mike Summers, he went to the Atlanta Falcons, and he told me that any offensive lineman that could do 30 reps or more on the bench, they felt like they had elite strength. They didn't even have to look at maybe any other numbers strength-wise. They felt like they had elite strength. Now, a lot of that's just endurance, not necessarily power. There's guys that are a lot stronger than me that didn't get 30 reps at the combine on the bench press, but I got to 30, and hopefully there were some teams that thought I had elite strength because of that, and I felt like I was pretty strong for my position. So you knock all that out, and then you got meetings with position coaches. You're essentially in this big room, and all these offensive line coaches around the league and their assistants are sitting around at tables, and there's a runner for each team. So as soon as you're finished up with one position coach, there's a guy standing next to you. He might have a Rams shirt on, and they'll say, hey, so-and-so from the Rams would like to speak to you after you're done. So then you shuffle straight over and go to that next interview. And so it's just kind of one after the other. Some want to just catch up and talk. Some asked what my favorite alcoholic drink was. It just across the board. What's your favorite food? They want to learn about you, but then also that's a time for them to maybe ask you about some X and O stuff, what you guys did in college, what you're comfortable with, where they can get a feel for kind of what your baseline intelligence level is heading into the NFL. And then that night, you'll do your team interviews. These are by request. At the time when I went, you could do up to 15. Now, some guys had 2 or 3 requests. I had all 15 slotted there. And so you literally go from one 15-minute interview straight to the next. And I did 15 of those in a row. It was an absolute grind, some of which I don't even remember all the specifics. Some of those that stood out, I remember my interview with the Steelers. Mike Tomlin sits right in front of you one-on-one, and everyone else is almost like in an audience just observing your conversation. I remember at one point he asked me, what's going to happen when Casey Hampton tells you you're practicing too hard and you need to cool it out the next day? I'm going to tell him, well, probably a misunderstanding because I'm going to practice how I practice. He said, oh, you're going to tell Casey Hampton, well, he's probably going to swing on you. I said, well, it's going to be a fist fight then. He's like, okay, you're going to fight Casey Hampton. I said, I don't care who it is. I'm going to do my job, and I'm going to come into the Steelers if you draft me and do it. And I think they liked that at the time. And at one point, I was rumored to be going to the Steelers at 32. The Bills nabbed me at 28 and changed my life, and I've been a part of the organization ever since. But I think they liked that answer. But those interviews could go from anything from you being on a whiteboard to sitting around in a circle with front office and coaches around the league. And up into those meetings, I was prepping on people's names so I could walk in and I knew most of the head coaches at the time, but who's the GM, who's the assistant GM, who's the offensive line coach, the offensive coordinator, so I could refer to them by name, hopefully make an impression on them. But the interviews was probably the biggest grind. The on-field testing comes the next day where you run your 40, you do your jumps and all that. And, physically that's a challenging day, but you get enough time in between events where you're not like gassed at any point, but you'll do, your stretch tests in there and you'll be warming up and do all your things. And then you're going at it. You're running your 40. And back then we didn't know what 40 time we ran at the time. You might be able to ask somebody what they clocked you at, but it wasn't posted. Now it's pretty cool how they posted, the guys get excited and celebrate for each other. But, at the time we didn't have those posted. I know that I ran a 5:1:40, but I had a 10-yard dash time of, I believe, a 1:69, which might have been the top for offensive linemen on the 10-yard split. So while I didn't run nearly the fastest 40 time, I had a really good 10, which is probably more applicable to offensive linemen. All right, so we're going to get into some questions from X. And so one person asked, do players feel weird about the body measurements part of the combine, AKA the underwear Olympics? And it is a little weird when you're walking around in just a pair of tights, especially for the weigh-in and for the body fat percentage. I got made fun of because I was out in California, so I came in with a nice tan. And so there was some offensive line coaches that gave me some grief about that, just trying to show up at tan, but you look better tan. And this is one time in your life where you have the most important interview of your life. You want to look the best you possibly can. Someone asked, most off-the-wall question that you were asked at the NFL Combine. I was in a meeting with the Ravens, and I didn't know this at the time, but John Harbaugh was really familiar and was decent buddies with my offensive line coach at Louisville. So he asked Brent Myers to ask me something about, a fight that I got in college, and it wasn't on the football field. And so I got asked about that, and it completely threw me off guard. I wasn't arrested at the time. It wasn't that big of a deal. Got swept under the rug, but I got asked about it at the Combine, and it shook me. And I knew Brent Myers told him about it, and I was all ticked off afterwards. And I called him that night, and he said, they love that. They want to know that you're an aggressive type of person. I use that as an example to say, he's a violent player. Someone asked, how focused on the more obscure measurements like hand size or teams, or do they matter at all as a combine filler? I'd say for some people it matters, especially quarterbacks. Hand size can matter for tackles, defensive linemen, arm length can matter. Now, ultimately, it's about what you can do on the field, your intelligence, maybe some of the tangibles, but some of those obscure ones, based upon certain schemes, teams want guys with longer arms on their defensive line if they have to hold guys off from getting to the second level, and having certain arm length can help. But, for the most part, those obscure measurements won't really matter. The one that I heard from a pro day that was really interesting to me was that the Pittsburgh Steelers would measure knee circumference, and they felt like guys with bigger knees didn't have as many knee injuries. So I felt like that was pretty interesting. Got a question. Does the 40 time matter for O linemen at all? Well, not really. And a lot of times the guys who run the really fast 40 times at the combine don't really pan out in the NFL. Sometimes there's reaches on those guys because they think they're going to be so athletic. But does it matter? Some. And to me, I said I ran a 5:1:40. And when you look at all of that, everything I did on the field and in the classrooms at the combine, Rick Dennison, who ended up being our offensive coordinator at Buffalo, but he was at Denver at the time, he came to meet with me in Louisville after the draft, and he told me I was the only person that he ever scouted that did over 30 reps of bench press, over 30 on the vertical jump, and over 30 on the Wonderlic. Pretty good combination of size, speed, explosion, but also intelligence. So I wear that as a badge of honor that at the time I was the only one that he had scouted that done all that. And so in that instance, he wasn't even considering my 40 time. And I don't think it really matters. The 10-yard dash can matter at times, but there's not even a lot of plays where we're running 10 yards down the field. And so I wouldn't say they matter that much. JJ Watt actually asked why I was so far off the line in the picture that I posted when I was asking about the questions on X. And so I couldn't remember exactly at the time, but as I was prepping for this podcast, it reminded me. So because I have the last name Wood and it goes in alphabetical order when you run, I was offensive lineman number 59. That means 58 other 300 plus pounders were running on the exact same surface in front of me. So I was looking at all the beads on that artificial surface, raised up to the top, and I could feel how soft the surface had become. So I went just to the side of it to try and catch an advantage. At the combine, you're going to try and catch every advantage you possibly could. And, even going back to the vertical jump, they're doing your vertical jump based upon how high you could touch on something based upon your standing reach. Well, if you can lock in your lat a little bit and lock that in and maybe not have your reach as far, maybe you can add a little bit to your overall jump score or jump height there. And to me, it got me over 30 inches. So it's all about catching those little inches, whether it's on the field or at the combine. It's all about finding those little inches at the combine. But all in all, I had a great experience. It was a grind. It was a long week, not a ton of sleep, mentally taxing throughout the week just to be on at all times because everywhere you go, there's coaches, there's personnel everywhere. But felt like I made myself some money at the NFL Combine. There's a lot of guys out there this week that are going to make themselves some money as well. Receivers running fast 40s, proven they have that elite speed, running backs as well at a certain size. These pass rushers, these defensive players, especially with these wide open, speedy offenses nowadays, they want to see, do you have that type of elite speed? But ultimately, these teams are going to watch the film. And if you can run fast in pads and you show it on film, it doesn't necessarily truly matter. I will say this, though, and I'll end with this. With the combine, guys that are just truly unprepared for the combine, they run a slow 40, they don't bench well, and they just don't look like they're prepared out there. To me, that translates to how you're going to prepare in the NFL. So to me, does it matter what you run your 40 in? Not necessarily, but if a guy doesn't take it serious, he's probably not going to take the little things serious at the next level. And teams consider that. How hard did you prep for this? And if you prepped really hard, you're likely going to prep really hard on a week-to-week basis. In the offseason, you're going to probably prep really hard before the spring coming back or really hard before training camp coming back. So the guys want to see that. And, you failed a drug test at the NFL Combine and you knew it was coming. Do teams really care that much if players smoke weed nowadays? I'd say probably not. But you knew it was coming and you didn't take it serious. So what type of decision are you going to make when you start having some money in your pocket here coming up? Are you going to continue to make bad decisions? Likely. And so to me, this is a big week to show that you were fully prepared as a player. Thank you for tuning into this episode. We're going to do another episode later in the week talking about what the Bills are looking for at the combine this week specifically. Thank you for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave us a comment. I appreciate you all.